Can a medium mech take on, take out, destroy a heavy mech? That's the question we're going to explore in this week's Battletech Mech Commander Tactica. And in terms of a framework, there is a difference. Are we talking about a lower tonnage, light medium mech versus a really heavy tonnage, heavy mech? I mean, there is a fine line. The rules kind of cut it right down, but there is a fine line where the heavier tonnage medium mechs and the lower tonnage heavy mechs, there is some crossover. And we're also going to put aside to framework, what about combined arms? What about lance mates? What the heck is going on? Perhaps you find yourself in a scenario where a heavy mech is pushing forward. You've been tasked with holding a position. Maybe it's a strategic position on the hex map, good elevation, good places to hide. Maybe it's just a mission objective. Maybe you've got some other units pushing forward from another lance. One-on-one. So the first thing is there is a pretty big jump. It's not so much, in my opinion, the armor. I mean, yes, a heavy mech is going to have more armor, but a medium mech, it's got some decent armor, and more importantly, it has a good array of weapons. We see this with light mechs where they will have a primary weapon. That primary weapon is usually a medium laser. That's what you're going to be firing every single turn. Secondary weapons are a little bit shorter, lighter range, less damage. I mean, you don't have a lot of tonnage to work with. So you might see a small laser. You might see an SRM 2-pack. You might see machine guns. Maybe an LRM 5-pack. Maybe a flamer. Now, there are some light mechs that break that mold and mount a PPC or a large laser or a brace of weapons. But that's your primary weapon, what you're going to be firing every single turn. When you jump into the medium mechs, and we've explored a number of inner sphere medium mechs that I've pushed up to the Battletech playlist here, when we're exploring medium mechs, now you start to see a primary weapon, a certain range band. Maybe it's a large laser, maybe it's an autocannon, but then there's a brace of secondary weapons that are actually very useful to attack. Medium lasers, further autocannons, long-range missiles, short-range missiles. So it has a lot more firepower. It becomes a threat as opposed to a nuisance or, right, we're going to get lucky with a shot. So a medium mech could put out some damage going against a heavy mech. It's going to have to chew through more armor. That's just a given. But what are we going to do to equalize that? What are we going to do to gain an advantage? Now, on the opposite end to framework it, heavy mechs, they're going to mount a lot more weapons. And the primary weapons are going to be doubled in most mechs, and they're going to pack a punch. Look at a Warhammer, 2 PPCs. Look at a Marauder, 2 PPCs. I know, Fritz, you're picking your favorite mechs. Well, let's go in with the Rifleman. Let's explore some other type of mechs. They've got significant firepower. That medium mech, even with some armor, let's say look at the Blackjack. I picked the Blackjack because it's got some good weapons. It's got some good armor. You can't take those hits. You really, really can't. So what you want to do is not be trading firepower back and forth for any amount of lengthy time. I mean, that's true in any weight class, but you can only take so much. That's the big challenge that we're going to have to overcome. I'm not worried about punching through the armor of a heavy mech. I'll get there. I'll do it. But how long can I take those shots back? So the first thing, of course, is I'm going to have to play defensively. Not so much for the armor, but for the fact that I need to keep those modifiers up. Let's look at a Blackjack versus a Warhammer, just to pull out 2 mechs that I really enjoy playing. If I'm that Blackjack pilot, I'm going to be needing to keep on moving, play defensive, play the range, keep the modifiers up, because I can't eat 2 PPC hits repeatedly. Now, there are some limitations, depending on the heavy mech, in terms of what can they realistically fire and clear heat every turn. And even if you're a mech warrior like myself that is consistently pushing heat, I'll burn that heat. I'll take those shots. Never tell me the odds. I will roll the dice. I would say for the most part that is not the norm. You want to be conservative with heat, especially because on a side note, side tactica, looking at the Warhammer as an example, if I burn some serious heat and crank that up with those PPCs, I'm going to start taking those negative effects What that means is at that point, if my opponent or some vehicles, if something can sneak in and get to close range, a great example would be like kind of mugging hovers that want to get in there with short-range missile packs and medium lasers and just blast me. If they close and now playing the Warhammer, I need to switch to my secondary weapons, my lasers, my SRM pack, just to drive them off to deal not only damage, but deal damage in a variety of places, then I'm maybe even engaging secondary targets. If I'm already high on the heat, I'm in trouble. I'm not going to be able to effectively mount that counteroffensive. So sometimes a Tactica with heavy mechs, and this is what I would kind of look at if I'm playing heavy versus medium, try to stay at range, try to encourage my opponent to fire those PPCs. Look, they could get lucky, right? It's Battletech. You could calculate all the odds and know you need 12s, and like you roll a bunch of 12s in a row. Like it happens. So I can't control that. But if I can encourage those shots, raise that heat, and then move in, that gives me an advantage. But trading back and forth, I need survivability because I cannot eat all those weapons. The advantage the medium has, or I should say the advantage that most mediums will have, they tend not to overheat as much. If we look at the Blackjack, if I look at the Wolverine, I can fire off shots and push that heat. But the big thing, and of course this doesn't apply for every mech, maneuverability. Mediums are still in that class where we've got jump jets. I need to be using those jump jets. And I'm not talking about death from above, which I might take for the lulls if you give it to me. I'm talking about jumping around, using terrain, jumping around to switch and get side armor, maybe get rear armor, get in different places, and really using that to be on the defensive to try and defend yourself and stack those modifiers from your opponent. Yes, jumping is going to give you, it's going to make it harder for you to hit. I mean, this massive war machine is flying through the air, but that position is very, very important. And what I mean by that is I might be in a position where I've got some good cover. Maybe I'm partially obscured. My legs are covered, or a part of my mech is obscured. That's kind of a weaker area. And I'm firing free shots, and that heavy mech moves up. Now it's time for me to redeploy. I don't have to be shooting every turn. I could jump over something, move back into that forest. By the time the heavy comes around, I'm again in a somewhat superior position. That's if I had to do it, but it's not going to be easy. It is definitely not going to be easy. Question for Mech Command and Mech Warriors. Certain light mechs. Now we're doing the initiative game, right? That's an overlay Tactica here. Certain light mechs, counter, agree, or disagree, are easier to defeat heavy mechs than mediums going against heavies. If I have a Jenner, now it is very specific. Locust, it's not going to do it. And I love the Locust, Wasp, Stinger. You can take your Inferno missiles, not going to do it. But if I have a Jenner, stock Jenner, it's got medium lasers, it's got the missiles, it's got the speed. I can get up there and get rear armor on that Warhammer. I can get up there and get rear armor on that Marauder. That's a major problem. The speed on certain light mechs with a certain weapons array, that's going to be huge. That's an all or nothing, because you might say, well, Fritz, look, a mech warrior in a heavy mech's never going to get caught like that. Well, you never know, right? It's the dance going back and forth. But from that perspective, there is zero. You don't have any armor. You just have nothing. I mean, I've seen it happen. A Warhammer will just decimate a Jenner in one round of close-in, short-range shooting. I mean, it's just crazy. But if it can get that rear armor. So sometimes certain light mechs can be potentially heavy hunters compared to lights versus mediums, where a lot of mediums, they're definitely not as fast as a light, but they can throw up enough speed. They can stay out of that arc. They can keep that distance. So at least for some crazy reason, if there is rear armor, based on how initiative works out, because you might have a more pressing area to move, at least it's not going to be, I get rear armor, I'm one hex away, I'm going to fire everything, I'm going to kick you, I'm going to do physical attacks. But mediums versus heavies, it can be done, but that is an uphill battle, one-on-one. That's why we've got lances. That's why we've got combined arms. That's why we've got Karnovs dropping in infantry like mad. That's why we've got warriors. We've got all this other stuff. But it is a tactica to explore because it can happen depending on the situation. Turning it over to Mech Command and my fellow Mech Warriors. Mediums versus heavies. 1-on-1. Yes, no, maybe. Depends on the mech.